And frankly speaking, here we are, where truth is our mission, rarely our realm, said as we see it, and frankly as well. I'm Joe Spina with very special guest, Ralph Briggs, and thanks for stopping in, Ralph. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Joe, and filling in for Paul. This is very humbling. And I'm a big fan of you guys, and I'm very, very humbled to be here.
But you know what? If you want to be humble, you got to talk to the folks there,
okay.
Not over there.
They're over there.
Yeah,
I thought they were over there, but they're over here.
Very good. Well, you went to BU, I went to BC, you know what I mean?
That's right, right.
About the same time.
We have more bean pots than you have, you understand?
You did, yeah. Great hockey, great hockey.
Good hockey.
Come to think of it.
Well, we're supposed to be better this year, but
and you also had Harry Aganis.
That's right.
Yeah.
His statue's outside the hockey rink.
Mm-hmm. And Fecto, I think Fecto was there at the same time with Harry Aganis.
Yes, Fecto, right. It was great hero.
Story.
Great hero. I remember one time I was, when he had just gotten out, when he was a prisoner, of course. I don't know
over 20 years.
Over 20 years.
And solitary confinement for a lot of it, yeah.
And when he got out one time, I remember I brought my two young girls at the time to Harry Aganis to the game, to the Walter Brown Arena, to the BU hockey game. And I was going to get him some snacks. I went downstairs, and he was waiting in back of me, just in back. And I recognized who he was. I didn't know him. And I said, would you like to go ahead, in deference to him in a situation? He says, no, I have a lot of patience. Oh. And you can, and of course it hit me right away what that meant. Right away what it meant. And
fascinating guy.
Yes, absolutely. And I think BU actually gave him a job so that he could build up some kind of some kind of pension.
He went down in 1950 over the Yalu River. Folks, this is a fascinating story because he was the link that kept the United States talking to China.
Right.
And actually Nixon used him as a pawn, not negatively, with Henry Kissinger to get his release. And it was Richard Nixon that got him released.
Right. It was Richard Nixon that got him released.
And that was it. Right. It's a funny thing, and this is contemporaneous. President Trump does not get enough credit for getting 3 basketball players released from China.
That just happened yesterday, the day before, I believe.
Exactly,
yes.
right.
And I don't know why he doesn't get credit for anything. And
but that one's important because, that would have really could have created an international incident because they would have put those guys away for 10 years in hard labor.
Right. They would have. They would have.
And he did it quietly, and that's it.
I think they were accused of stealing something or
shoplifting.
Shoplifting, some expensive material or something like that.
Foolish stuff.
Yeah.
But I got to get to Frankly Joe, and we got to get on with the show.
Yes, we do. We have 3 hours, don't we?
You're going to be Frankly Ralph today.
Oh, okay.
In a moment, or the moment, it was sure that Senator McGee would be the next mayor of the city of Lynn. The music began. An open seat invariably sets the strings in motion. State Rep Brendan Creighton, as expected, quickly announced his candidacy for McGee's state seat on Facebook. Mayor Kennedy hinted that she had an interest in pursuing the opening. Her musical taste is eclectic. Brian LaPierre, who's for the second consecutive time topped the ticket at large by wide margins, while the brass started stirring a little bit on that one. Should he or shouldn't he? And not to be overlooked is the popular Don Wong of Saugus, state rep from Saugus, and his drums started beating. Who else might join the game of musical chairs is speculative. What is certain is ambitions have been set in motion. So let the music begin.
Yeah, I know Mayor Judy wanting to run for senator. She better get a better campaign people with her because
I might argue that she recognized that she wasn't going to win and that maybe she was looking at his seat to swap jobs.
I wonder if she wanted to win. I shouldn't say that.
That's exactly right.
I don't know that well. I worked with her. I've met her and I've talked to her. The first time around, she invited me. I was in her circle. I was invited to her Christmas party, but afterwards we were cut off. But no problem. But I really wonder whether she realized that the budget shortfall maybe is impossible to overcome. This is just in my mind, okay? Because she did.
I
was at a venue, okay, 3 times with McGee. Twice he was there. One time he couldn't make it. He sent his minions there. And she was always at this venue, and she never showed up. And
so that's your suspicions were
well,
aroused?
my suspicions were she doesn't really want to be mayor.
Well,
that's my feeling is.
What about this? We'll speculate, and then we're going to move on to you, Ralph. You know, frankly, Ralph. Let's assume that she turned around. This is an assumption, folks, but I think it has some currency. Let's assume that she saw the handwriting on the wall that she wasn't going to be able to beat him.
Right.
Okay? You know, it was just the circumstances stacked up against her. The stars were against her.
Right.
So she says, I'll tap dance through. I won't create animus, right? And I'll decide whether or not to go after his open seat. Don't forget, if Dawn Wong doesn't enter that race, she has a free pass into the final because Judy's a Republican. That's a partisan race.
Right.
Now, Brendan is a Democrat.
Right.
Or LaPierre are Democrats.
Right.
I doubt that they'd fight against each other. But let's assume that Brendan takes it. You know, he's got the early lead. He's the early favorite. However, that's a special election. They'll be concluded sometime in the late spring, early summer.
Right.
And then that fall, they're going to run again for the real term. So there's a doubleheader. Judy could try him out in the primary, and she could, in the special election, and find out where her strength is. And thereafter, go back after him in the final, if she chooses to do that. Don't forget, she's a Republican. She would have a lot of help from Charlie Baker. Saugus, Nahant, Marblehead, and Swampscott are a lot more conservative than folks coming out of Lynn.
Right. I didn't see Charlie Baker helping her in this election, though. I don't think he got involved.
I think he wanted to, but they weren't really interested in bringing him. I really think that they realized that it was a wasted effort. And maybe I'm wrong.
Special elections are really strange.
They are.
And the way people get... Because once you're in, you have all that cachet of the incumbent. And once you have that cachet of the incumbent, you are really strong.
Oh, of course.
Because that's why they stay in for years and years. Now, I remember reading about the Chelsea race, and I can't think of her name who got in. But whoever won, she got less than 5% of the total less than 5% of the voters voted. So she was elected with less than 5% of the voters.
Well, think about this, and we got to move on quickly thereafter. Only 29% of the eligible voters voted in our primary.
Correct.
That was about 15,000 votes between the two of them.
Right.
He got a 9 and change. She got 5 and change.
Right.
Agreed?
Right. 9 to 5.
So you're talking about someone who got, 29% of the vote. He probably got of that 29%, 12, 13, or whatever. The point of the matter is, it wasn't a whole bunch of... The population of the city of Lynn is over 90,000.
Right.
All right. Forget the population because you have to go by registered voters.
Right.
So as the population, you got 10% of the vote.
Right.
As a population.
Right.
So registered voters, I'll double it, okay? So he might have gotten 20% of the vote. The organized minority always defeats the disorganized majority. And we're going to get to you, Ralph.
When I saw McGee, I'll get to it, but when I saw McGee speak at a certain venue, I saw all the big shots, the people that control the party, were with him. And I knew it was all over.
He was anointed.
They have,
and Judy knew that.
Right.
So to Mr. Ralph, this is Ralph, frankly Ralph.
Nationwide, roughly 320,000 individuals from 10 countries have been granted temporary status. Note the word temporary. That's about to change. The Temporary Protected Status, TPS, was established to protect people from deportation who came to the U.S. from countries ravaged by natural disasters and wars, or both, a noble gesture. As of November 6th, the Homeland Security website issued an alert for TPS Nicaraguans in the U.S. that their status will expire in 2019, since the devastation that triggered their status has been remedied. I believe that was an earthquake. Similarly, an alert for TPS Honduras stated that an extension of their status to July 2018. The alerts have caused folks like Jose Palmer of Lynn, himself a TPS recipient of El Salvador, to speak out for a need for the TPS program. to be revamped through legislation to provide for those who fall under the TPS a full path to citizenship. Your thoughts, should TPS legislation be enacted as Jose suggests?
Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel bad. About 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with pre-diabetes. So my doctor says, do your walk and eat chicken sandwiches. Do a walk and do chicken sandwiches every day, all right? So what I do is I do my 3-mile walk through Lynn, and I stop off at Wendy's and have a chicken sandwich every day. So yesterday, when I was doing my chicken sandwich, there was a fellow in there, I think he was from El Salvador, I think. And he's worked there part-time. So I hadn't seen him in a while, and he's only working Sundays, and I usually don't go Sundays. So I said, how have you been? He said, oh, fine. He says, I'm in college now. I'm spending most of my time in college. And this is very typical of the Spanish that work in these fast food places, at least the ones that I go to. Almost every one of them is trying to advance themselves. I gave them a lecture one day. They were all cleaning the tables, and we have a little chat there. A little group that I talked to, a lot of the old-time Lynn guys, and I gave them a lecture. I said, the Democrats want you to get $15 an hour. You know what I want? I'm a conservative. I want you to get $50 an hour. There's a lot of things you can do. You can go to 2-year schools and get into medicine and do radiology and all kinds of technical assistance. And they sort of agree with me. So I hope, I don't know if they took my advice years ago, or I'd like to think that. But as far as this guy, Jose Palma, right? The guy's, I guess...
He's been in this country, Ralph, for 15 to 19 years, I forget which.
Right.
He raised his children here.
All right.
I think it makes sense. We're talking about 320,000 nationwide. I think it makes perfect sense that legislation should be enacted to find a pathway to permanent status. Right. I think that's the humane, the right thing to do. It's a one-time situation. This is not constant. Then we can rethink things later on.
Right.
I've said to Paul consistently, I said, look, the problem with people, we're not going to get rid of the 11 million. Forget it. It's not going to happen.
No.
You might as well just absorb them, enforce the immigration laws, build a wall, that's a metaphor, and let things settle.
Right.
And that's the best way to fly. But nobody wants to be reasonable. We've got to get to good ideas and bad ideas, though. Now, we already talked about the TPS revamp. You and I both agreed that it's probably a good idea that we revamp it?
I think we should revamp it.
All right. Now, Councilor Losey, congratulations to Wayne. Got himself elected again with a tough opponent, by the way. It wasn't like he had someone easy.
Yeah. I think he was the only one that had, Chakotis had a tough opponent, too.
Who did?
Chakotis, I think she only won by 100.
Yeah, that was a fairly close race.
Were your numbers right at the end when I listened to you there?
She won by a couple of hundred.
Couple hundred she won. I thought
just
it was,
done a couple hundred.
Okay, all right.
But Wayne Losey came up with a really good idea, and I want to throw it out there for folks. And I call it Losey's LED.
Right.
And in effect, what it is to convert from the lighting systems we now have on the street lights, right?
Right.
To these LEDs,
right,
which cost effective. It's about $400,000 a year that the city would save on lighting, but the initial outlay is $2 million, and you'd have to bond it because, in fact, we have a problem bonding because our financial situation is so bad. But if you look at that in real terms, it's paid off in 5 years, and thereafter it's a bonus. So fundamentally, it's a good idea, and I kind of like it. Ralph,
it's a good idea. It's too bad that we can't get some kind of help from outside on that. Because I also believe that LED lights are much brighter, I believe, aren't they?
You can see, but at our age, we like it like that, right? You can't see at nighttime. I can't anyways.
I know, it's difficult.
Is it difficult?
It's getting more and more difficult.
Oh, by the way, and I like telling this to these folks out there, in Japan,
right,
and in Scotland,
right,
with the LEDs,
right,
they use blue.
Right.
And what happened was the suicide and murder rate went down. Would you believe it? Yeah, so some good thing. Now, we talked about Judy and her Senate bid.
Right.
Do you think it's a good idea for Judy to run or not?
No, I don't think she can win. I don't think so.
Okay, so you think that this is it?
I like her. She's a good person. I think she's done a good job.
Okay.
But I don't think she can win. So
you folks out there, let us know whether you think Judy ought to run or not and whether she has a chance. There's no question that Brendan is a decent candidate. I mean, I may not agree with him politically on some of his positions.
Should be running against Brendan.
Well, right now he's running against nobody.
Right.
It's almost it's as if they're going to anoint him.
Right.
But he is eligible to be challenged by a Republican or an independent.
Right.
Because it's a partisan race.
Right.
So it's not just a primary. He has to run a primary and a final. So somebody's going to come forward.
He's got a machine working for him.
Well, he's
And
got a
it's
lot
tough.
of he's got a lot of folks behind him.
Right.
So if someone has the courage to run, which they should, look, everybody should be challenged.
I would like to see Judy there in the State House.
She wouldn't be. She would be difficult to defeat. By the way, she's got a lot of stats in her favor. She's a female, obviously, from the city of Lynn, Republican. She's going to come out of Lynn with a fairly decent vote. A lot of people that may have voted for Tommy McGee were not hostile toward her, right? And they may say, you know what? Let me give her a chance again. Let me put her back in the hunt. And that's possible. Well, you folks, your idea. Now I want to go to your favorite subject, which is the ferry.
The ferry.
Don't you love it? They want to do it year-round. Do you think it's a good idea?
I use the commuter rail all the time because I love it to go see my granddaughter. They live over one of the Prudential Towers, and I use it to go see my doctor. It takes so little time. And to me, that's the greatest thing in the world, okay? If they would fix the station up a little bit, you know. And Tommy McGee, who was in charge of, I gave it to him one day about, I think he was in charge of the transportation when he was in the Senate. Well, he still is in the Senate. And so I gave him a little bit of a hard time about that. But as far as the ferry, okay, this year it only ran once. And how many people can you get on there? And who uses the ferry from Lynn? It's mostly people, I believe, from outside. It only goes once and comes back, comes back. I guess it comes back from Boston, I guess, once this year. I don't see how spending money on that when they stopped the crosstown bus. We used to have I don't know if you know about this. We used to have a crosstown bus that you could get on in Central. And it went all the way into Boston. Did you know that?
Yes, I used to take it.
Okay. They say it was around since the 40s and 50s or something. They cut that out. You and
I qualified for the 50s, Ralph. So who are we trying to kid?
I'll tell you, I had a picture. I can't find anymore. When I was 4 years old, I was passing out.
Remember 4 years old? Yeah.
When I was 4 years old, I was down the end of my street. There was a big rally, a political rally, and I was passing out. Remember these cards they used to have with their bios and their pictures on them? I was passing them out for the school committee candidate years ago, many, many years ago, and I had a picture. I can't find that picture anymore. So I've been in politics a long time.
Do you remember when Eisenhower came to Lynn in the Commons?
No, I don't remember.
Before your time, huh?
No.
Look, the whole point of the matter is the ferry is a wonderful, wonderful perk that's unaffordable. It just costs far too much per ride than it generates.
The only thing I can think of, if you could get a private company to do it that also could make money doing something else, excursion trips or something like that, I don't know if it could be, and the state gave them a little bit of money to help them out. That's the only way I could think. It would be nice to jump on the ferry and go to Boston on some summer day.
How would you like to go in February?
No, it's too cold.
Well, they want to do it year-round, okay? I mean,
no, I don't want to go in February. I can't understand anyone who would go down that street to pick up the ferry.
We're going to give you a little history lesson,
Okay.
You didn't major in history, did you, when you went to BU?
No. I was a marketing major.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. I think you were a history major.
Huh?
You know an awful lot of history.
Well, we're going to do a little history lesson on James K. Polk.
James K. Polk.
He was born in 1795. He didn't live too long. He died in 1849. As a matter of fact, he went home to rest after his first term, and the rest became permanent. So he checked out at 53. A lot of folks don't realize how important James Polk was to U.S. history. That's why I brought him up. If we can go to the election of 1844, now take a look at that map. You see, folks, that was the continental United States at that time. That's the sum total of all states. In fact, there's a little mistake on that map because I believe that Arkansas, I may be mistaken, but I believe Arkansas was a territory at that time, not necessarily a state. Florida, as you can see, is grayed out because it wasn't a state. And if you look at the northern section of Maine, that was actually a dispute with Canada, or Britain at the time. And there's a question about Michigan. But in any case, let me tell you, and there's an irony here. All of the blue states voted for Polk. But Polk came from Tennessee, which is in purple. And Henry Clay, who we ran against, Henry Clay, by the way, came from Kentucky.
Right.
And Henry Clay ran five times.
5 times. Henry Clay
never made it.
Never made it president.
Ran 5 times, came up short. So that's what happened in 1844. Right. And Clay was from the Whig Party.
He was a Whig. Clay was Whig.
He was a Whig.
Yeah.
And
now Polk was the last Jackson Democrat.
Oh, was he ever?
Democrat,
I mean, he was. I mean, he was passionately, Democrat or Jacksonian Democrat.
He was for Western expansion. Okay.
Yes.
Which the Northerners didn't like, basically, and I believe it has a lot to do with slavery. I don't know if you know that.
Well,
a lot to do with you disagree
not so
with
much
me, but
then. There were other issues involved here.
Right.
Because don't forget, in those days, if you were from Tennessee and Kentucky, you were considered from the Wild West.
Right.
That was the Wild West.
That was the West. Right.
All right. So we're going to do a few facts on Polk,
okay.
And we'll do some of its achievements, and then we'll chitty-chat a little bit about it.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So James, some facts. And you're going to help out because, I like your voice. He was the 11th President of the United States in 1845 to 1849. He was correct, punctual, and industrious. That's a character trait. He graduated, he was a premier scholar in both classics and mathematics. He was no dummy. Very bright guy.
No.
In fact, I think he was the valedictorian, or salad-dictorian, as they call him back then, of his class. A confirmed Democrat, folks, but not the Democrat of today. A Democrat of its era.
They were different. They were different. Right.
An unfailing supporter, as you rightly pointed out, of Andrew Jackson. His wife, Sarah Childress Polk, and she lived a quite long time for that era, right? She's got about, 88 years in there?
All right.
And she was the most politically dominant president's wife since Abigail Adams. So much so that they called her the presidentitress, I mean, she was involved, like Woodrow Wilson's wife, or
Reagan's
Hillary.
wife.
You get what I mean?
Hillary,
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Very active, and carried him. Because this guy was not what you'd call, he was sickly, by the way. He grew up sickly.
Well, wasn't everybody sick back then?
Oh, of course.
Because there was no medicine for anything.
Yeah, but to go at 53 is kind of, He served in the House of Representatives from Tennessee from 1825 to 1839, 14 years, and he was Speaker of the House for 4 of those years. In other words, he was the Paul Ryan of his day, right?
Right.
Now, what happened was he decided to run for governor, got beat both times.
Right.
So he goes to the convention in 1844, and everybody wanted everybody else. He's the first dark horse nominee in American political history of that time. Nobody wanted, all of a sudden, he gets a nomination. He was probably more surprised than anybody. In fact, I think he went there looking to be vice president. There were 2 burning issues. Oh, by the way, he was so unknown. Listen to this one. Who is James K. Polk? That was Henry Clay's campaign. Who the heck is he? He's giggling and laughing.
Right.
Nobody knows who he was until he got elected.
Clay thought he was going to win that one.
He was the Donald Trump of his day.
Yes.
Now, there are 2 burning issues, folks, and these are very, very important. The annexation of Texas. Texas wanted to be annexed to the United States. The slave question that you're talking about happened because Texas, they wanted to make 5 or 6 states out of Texas, which would have thrown the balance in the Senate way off.
Right.
So they said, oh, no, you can come in, but we're not going to carve you up into a whole bunch of states, which made it the Lone Star State, this big, massive thing. Because it was an independent country. From 1835, it won its independence.
Right.
It was the Lone, right? Sam Houston was president.
Very important. And people don't realize, even back then, they thought about the Supreme Court, because if the Supreme Court had switched, slavery might have went on, could have went on longer.
Well, it had been contained by Henry Clay.
Right.
On the compromise, the Missouri Compromise. So it couldn't go beyond a certain latitude line, and Texas was below that latitude line. You could have made a whole bunch of states out of it.
Right.
The Oregon Territory was a different issue because it was above the line and slavery was prohibited above that line.
That's correct, right, at that time.
The Oregon Territory became a critical issue in the annexation of Texas. And there was a big fight over the Oregon Territory, which in those days consisted of British Columbia. So there was a slogan there, 5440, that's the Northern Parallel, 5440 or fight.
Right.
That was a rallying cry. And we would have been fighting not Canada, the British, because at that time Canada was under British control, and the British were licking their chops, like taking another shot at us, right? In 1844, we weren't what we were in 1917. You get what I mean?
We had a hard time with the Mexican War, even.
Exactly.
We didn't do too well.
And by the way, in the Oregon Territory, folks, the Russians had a big stake in it at that time.
Right, because they were coming down.
They were trappers. They had no population, but they were also claiming it.
They were down from Alaska.
Yeah. Well, we bought Alaska from them right after the Civil War in 1867.
1867.
Yeah, we called Stewart's Folly,
Stewart's Folly, right.
Wasn't
that was done. I think that was done during the Civil War, wasn't it?
Post-Civil War.
Really?
It was 18.
Oh, Stewart was still
1867.
He was still on.
And also at the time, James Polk was the youngest president. He was under 50. He was 49 when he got elected. So that was quite young back then.
That was quite young.
You know?
Right. Now Biden wants to run. He's going to be almost. He's going to be older than us.
Dominus Robiscum, Joe. Anyways, you're going to do Polk's achievements because there are many. Okay. Go get them, Ralph. You got it there? Polk's achievements?
Polk's achievements.
Large territorial gains to start with, right?
Large territorial gains.
Go ahead. And what else? You got it up there? Have you found it?
I will find it soon.
Here. I can give it to you if you
can.
Here, I'll give you mine. All right.
Okay, here's Polk's achievements.
Okay.
He had large territorial gains. It was Oregon, California, and Texas. Annexation of Texas, of course, resulted in a 2-year war with Mexico. Ulysses S. Grant would later call the war with Mexico the most unjust war in history.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a captain at that time.
Yeah.
And he felt that we had suckered Mexico on the Nueces River thing, which is fascinating. So all you folks out there that don't like America, you can lay another one on the Americans. I happen to think that we have our mistakes, but the good thing about the United States, we self-correct. That's correct. The key.
Right.
Keep going with the achievements.
California, part by conquest and purchase, became part of the United States domain. During Polk's term, the northwest boundary became fixed by treaty.
We're talking about the boundary between Oregon
and Canada.
No, I'm talking about Washington. Montana, Idaho,
right.
North Dakota, Minnesota.
Right.
That all became fixed. It was called the 46th parallel.
Right.
As opposed to 54, 40, and fight. Chuck that back up there, Pedro, please. Go ahead. This is important.
Well, the Canadian parallel is 49, right?
Look at what happened with the Panama Canal. See, Colombia, at that time it was called New Grenada, was part of Colombia.
Okay.
Panama did not exist. So what did he pull off? Which is important. Take a look at that. He did a treaty with Colombia.
A treaty with Colombia.
He got the right of way.
Right of way of Panama, right.
Yeah, that's important because that's the only way that we could quickly go from East Coast. We had no West Coast.
Right.
We did, that was important. And 46 is important.
What was the Tariff Act of 1846? Lowered duties on imported goods.
That's why we didn't go to war with the British. That particular Tariff Act, along with peace negotiations, instead of going to war, how we created that boundary line with Canada, present-day Canada, with the British. Right. And that was a good piece of work. He also
established the Department of the Interior.
Because we grabbed so much land, you had to have it.
So somebody has to take care of basically inside.
Exactly.
Okay.
All the expansion that took place.
Which we have today, which is the Cabinet Secretary today.
I never knew this.
Established the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis, Maryland.
Did you know that?
Didn't know that.
I didn't either.
No,
I thought that was earlier on.
I don't know how they got offices before that. I don't know.
I have no idea.
I have no idea how they did it.
And this is an important one.
Authorized the Smithsonian Institute, a national foundation for all areas of science.
And that's a great institution. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he did accomplish quite a bit.
Yeah.
Now he had some witticisms. He had some witty expressions. Now you find it while I started off.
Okay.
Let's put it the witty Polk. He said, one great object of the Constitution was to restrain majorities from oppressing minorities or encroaching upon their just rights.
Right.
That's an affirmation of why we're a republic and not a direct democracy. Would you agree to that, Ralph?
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
Next one's yours.
The whole frame of the federal Constitution proves that the government which it creates was intended to be one of limited and specific powers.
You and I both argue that all the time, don't we?
10th Amendment. See, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, you know what that is, okay?
Yeah.
The 10th Amendment is practically null and void.
Oh, they try to make it null and void.
They try to make it null and void because of the 14th Amendment.
13th, 14th, and 15th.
14th,
Yeah.
mostly because of the 14th.
Mostly the 14th.
Mostly the 14th Amendment. That's a very interesting.
But the whole idea is you have to have limited government,
Limited
otherwise
government, right.
it can be oppressive.
Right.
And this is the NSA now is with robots and the technology we have today.
Right.
The other day I was called to somewhere, and they asked for a couple of little things, and the next thing you know, they had my whole history. They knew how many moles I had on my ass.
I bought a whole bunch of different things for the wedding for myself and different things, and now they keep popping up on my computer. How do they know all these things?
Yeah, exactly.
It pops up everywhere. It pops on my email.
Do you notice in this election that Tom McGee, vote for Tom McGee, popped up all the time on Facebook?
McGee things will pop up.
Every 2 minutes.
I don't know. Is that because we're all on these political?
I have no idea.
I have no idea. I don't know how they do it.
They did it. Minorities have a right to appeal to the Constitution as a shield against such oppression. Very important.
Right.
Once again, folks, that's why we're a republic, not a direct democracy. You know, when you hear Hillary Clinton copping about the popular vote, that's bad. Popular votes is not the key.
Right.
They specifically came up with the Electoral College to protect the minorities from the rule of the majority.
As a matter of fact, in the early 19th century, I believe that is how blacks got that slavery was abolished from Massachusetts. I think it was a court case, I believe. I believe it was a court case.
Yeah.
And that's why, because at the start of the war, you know, slavery was illegal in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it was illegal. It was illegal above the Mason-Dixon line.
No, not everywhere. Not in Ohio.
Ohio's a rite of passage.
Oh.
Most folks went. You know,
but
the
slavery was
Underground
legal.
Railroad.
Slavery was legal in Ohio even after the Civil War.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
I have to check on that because
I
know they transited through Ohio to Canada.
Right.
That was the escape route to Canada.
But slavery still was in Ohio even after the Civil War.
Folks, I want you to check on Ralph because you know, if Ralph was wrong, he's going to be chastised and left out of the mix here.
I want a free meal somewhere if I'm right.
Yeah. Well, you may not get one. You may have to pay for one. So it is next is yours. It is not.
It is not questioned that the federal government is one of limited powers. Its powers are such and such only as expressly granted in the Constitution or are properly incident to the expressly granted powers and necessary to their execution.
Well, Scalia would love this.
Right.
Anton Scalia, strict constructionists, love that paragraph.
Strict constructionists.
Right.
This is the basic fight in the Supreme Court between the Democrats and the Republicans. That's why they always fight.
Right.
Because the Republicans want strict construction of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. And the Democrats want it to expand whatever somebody thinks it is.
Isn't it ironic that he was a strict Democrat, a Jacksonian strict Democrat?
Right.
And what did he believe in?
He believed in strict construction of the Constitution.
Andrew Jackson abolished the National Bank.
Right.
Nicholas Bill couldn't stand it, right?
And also, he wanted limited government. So actually, the Democrats and the Republicans have completely flipped. A lot of people don't know that. We're all flipped anyway.
Well, they were. Well, they were also for the common man because they were frontiersmen.
Right.
They understood that hard work could carry you anywhere. They were against the elitists from the Northeast, which is kind of ironic if you take a look at Henry Clay got a lot of votes from the North. Prior to Andrew Jackson, every single president came from either Massachusetts or Virginia.
Right.
Every one of them.
Right.
And they were from the Federalist Party, fundamentally. Jefferson wasn't.
Right.
But they were big believers in this elitism type of establishment, Bush-type Republicans, right?
Right.
And that radically changed with Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson. He was for the people, basically.
Yeah, very much so.
And
common folk.
Matter of fact, when he opened up the White House after he was elected, and they almost ruined the White House, but that was another
with all the whiskey that they grabbed from the Shays Rebellion, you know what I mean? They had a hell of a time. A crowd of persons came in as soon as my office. He's talking about when he got elected. A crowd of persons came in as soon as my office was open when I became president. Among them were several ladies who called to pay their respects. None who called had any business or more important than their ardent desire to serve the country, provided they could be appointed to a good office. As it has none of these to dispose of, they were, of course, disappointed. So everybody's trying to hustle a job. When you're a winner, everybody wants a job.
I hope none of them were teenagers anyway.
And, you know, every time you give somebody a job, you tick off everybody else that didn't get the job, right?
I was trying to think that Moore situation in Alabama. You didn't pick that up, or you picked it up and you didn't want to talk?
Oh, no, what? Oh, you were talking about?
Teenagers.
Oh, that's awful.
Dating teenagers, I don't know. I dated teenagers when I was a teenager. I don't know if that was wrong.
You know, that is a no-brainer about, and I'm very happy to see that everybody, you know, first of all, there should never be a rush to judgment, but the facts have come out, they're so preponderant that he's got to go. You can't.
Preponderance of the evidence is
without question.
You can't.
And I'm not saying, look, we have people in that country that went through due process that should have gone to jail, that didn't go to jail. O.J. Simpson being a perfect example, right, from the original charge. So justice in our country is a little torturous, not necessarily just at all times. Otherwise, Hillary Clinton would be long gone. But
the funny thing is, talk about people. When it gets, I've been on 4 different juries. I don't know if you've probably been on juries.
I'm deaf.
4 different juries, and the jurors are pretty sharp and they're pretty fair.
Yes, they are.
They're very fair.
Of your peers.
Yeah, they're very fair. They're very fair.
With me, it is exceptional, said Polk. Exceptionally true that the presidency was no bed of roses. It was a tough job. Obviously, it killed him. Right?
It's a difficult, very difficult situation.
I want to throw a map up, folks, for you people to take a look at. And I want you to see President Polk. You see that orange Mexican territory seized by the U.S. in 1848? That's a consequence of the war with Mexico. Now, notice California is in the mix. Take a look at the southern boundary of Arizona. Do you see that? It's still in orange, still part of Mexico. That's called the Gadsden Purchase, which happened in 1853. Because of the railroads. If you notice, there's a river going right through there, and they needed that river valley in order to get the railroads to connect the east and the west, called the Gila Valley. At that point, in 1853, the United States continental look has remained the same.
They probably needed water because they were steam run, right? They needed to be near water because they were steam locomotives.
And not only that, because of the flat valley, you didn't have to go through mountains, right? And that was not. But the point I'm trying to make is that we became a country in 1783 officially. Forget about the 1776 stuff because we hadn't done anything. You only become a country when you win the war and you have, you know, and the Articles of Confederation ended when we're under the Constitution. George Washington was 1783. By 1853, we went from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Bye-bye Buffalo, bye-bye anything in the way, okay? And that happened in a shorter lifespan. You and I have outlived that period. Both of us are a little over 70, okay? So it's fascinating how quickly history changes.
Right. There were only 48 states when I was a young man thinking about this kind of stuff.
Don't tell people that. They don't realize that.
I know, 48 states?
I think Obama thought we had 57 states, didn't he?
I think at one time, yes.
Yeah, so...
He broke up Texas, maybe.
Exactly. We have some comments to get to. Oh, yeah. And you're involved in some. I want to go to message 4, if I can, from Malcolm Mitchell. It says, "Hello, Joe. I watched your post-election show with Mr. Kerrigan and Mr. LaPierre and take exception to their view about my statement that unions are overly involved in who runs the city of Lynn, and who in big letters. Mind you, I'm a former member of the local 201 and also a member of the Stewards Council, so I'm no rookie to the unions in our city. My involvement with unions goes back to the days of Harpo McMahon, and that is a name for you.
That's a long one.
Bert Farnham and Kevin Ma, along with Jeff Crosby. I fully understand the major help the unions have been to the middle class, i.e. 40-hour work week, job safety, vacation time, sick time, to name a few. In all honesty, the current unions in Lynn are trying to maintain their stronghold on City Hall and influence our elected officials' stands and votes by political pressure. Yes, unions are needed, part of Americana, but need to be far more above board with the people of the city of Lynn about their selfish political gains. Ralph, you answered this, so I want you to read your own comment.
Okay. Unions will bring the city to its knee in the future. As to the money the city is getting from the former Beacon site, LaPierre has said that the money will soon flow from that development. Did he not, and the rest of the council, not vote to give them a tax break for 10 years? I'm pretty sure that's true. I think they gave them taxes, no taxes for 10 years. And LaPierre said that we're getting money from them pretty quickly.
Now, here is the point. Let's cut it all aside. Let's get to the philosophical point.
Okay.
Are you opposed to unions?
No.
Is Malcolm opposed to unions?
No.
Is Joe Spina opposed to you?
No.
Absolutely not.
No.
Unions are necessary.
Absolutely.
Is there abuse of unions?
Absolutely.
Is there abuse of unions, Malcolm? Absolutely, probably.
Absolutely.
Is there abuse of unions? Yes. Is there abuse of government?
Absolutely.
Is there abuse of government? Yes. Yes. When something gets too big, too unwieldy, it becomes dangerous. Whether it's government, business, by the way, is just as, monopoly in business, no good either.
No good.
Or even in education. Because without competition, things go away.
Well, look at the charter school thing. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
The charter school thing that just came up just today in the item. And they don't want the charter schools because at the meeting last night, all the teacher unions were there to stop the charter schools, all right, from expanding. Now,
they're going to the Hood building, aren't they?
I think they are. Yeah.
Go ahead.
But they want to stop them as much as they can, and I know the situation where the money doesn't go back to the schools is wrong. But still, if people, my comment today on the item was on Facebook was if the charter schools are so lousy and no one likes them, how come when they have new openings that all the parents are going out of their minds to try to get their kids into them? So something is off somewhere.
But look, charter schools are public schools, so let's not talk about the fact that they're somehow separate from. They're different, but they're public schools.
Different.
The problem, and we have to be upfront and honest about it. The problem is that the money is attached to the student. It's like portable.
Right.
So Ralph, you're worth in the city of Lynn roughly $13,600. Okay. So if you go to a charter school, that $13,600 goes with you to the charter school.
Right.
It's a zero-sum game. It would have cost $13,600 if you were in the school system, and it's going to cost you $13,600 outside of it. But what happens is that charter school says, I don't like you, Ralph. You've been too much of a pain in the butt. The heck with you. You're out of here. You're back over to the Lynn Public School System. They keep the money.
Right.
I disagree with that.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense, really.
No, it doesn't. If they turned around and they had you for a school year is per diem. A teacher actually gets paid per diem. It's spread to make it easier. So 182 days, I believe, in the senior high school is, and they're a little less in the elementary, per day, per diem. So you could put a per diem cost. How many days was that kid over at the charter school? And you return the money for those days not used.
To the budget, right.
Exactly.
Right.
That would be equitable. Nobody has a bitch that way. But there is another problem. The charter school, and this is their strength, they can get rid of a pain. They can get rid of a cantankerous student.
Right.
Lynn Public Schools can't do that.
That's right. That's why they're a little bit, they're a quasi-public school. Quasi.
They're a public school with benefits.
Right.
Like I noted that the #1 high school in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is Boston Latin.
Right.
Now, Boston Latin's a public high school. 2 of my granddaughters graduate from Boston Latin, and both of them received full scholarships to major universities.
Absolutely.
One went to yours, went to BU. It's a math major.
When I worked for a Fortune 500 company, my boss wasn't a college graduate. She was from Boston Latin. It's the smartest person I've ever met. And she never went to college. She's smarter than any college person I've ever met.
Why?
Unbelievable school.
But why is Boston Latin considered the #1 school? It's because it's an exam school.
Absolutely.
Of my 3 granddaughters that lived in Boston, 2 qualified. The third one, sorry for you, didn't make it.
Well, maybe
so they're selective on who they take to start with.
Maybe we should have an exam school in Lynn.
Well, you'd have the ACLU screaming and yelling about that, I guess. See, Boston Latin was established, it's probably been grandfathered in. When I went to graduation of my granddaughters, if you want to talk about, people like to talk about white privilege and all the rest of this stuff, trust me, the disproportionate amount of kids that graduate from Boston Latin
are white.
Oh, no.
No?
Oh, no. They're not from Europe.
Oriental.
Yeah, they came from either Japan, China, Vietnam, or
You're
whatever,
right.
or Bangladesh. Right. They were East Asians,
right.
predominant. So why that's the case, they can do all sociological studies on it. That's true. I'll tell you another one that surprised me.
We could have a whole show on that.
Absolutely, you would. But you see, that's going to arouse a lot of people's bias.
Be very
when you go up, and
controversial.
folks, I went to St. Anselm's graduation for my other granddaughter a couple of years back, and I was absolutely shocked at the disproportionate amount of females graduating as opposed to males. It had to be 65-35 female skew, right? Way out of proportion. Now, I went to BC, and BC is like a large St. Anselm's, right?
Right.
And it's a university, folks. Boston College is not a college, it's a university,
Right.
which means it has many colleges under its umbrella. I happen to go to what they call A&S, Arts and Science. Do you know how many females there were in the entire Arts and Science college? Zero.
Zero. We only had one in my business school section. One.
Okay.
One.
All right. Now, I'm not going to tell you that was the case in the School of Education or in the nursing school or the School of Sociology because there was a greater proportion of female. Now, that was the times. Times were different then. And they're changing for the better, folks, not for the worse. Would you agree? I mean, you went to your daughter's wedding recently, right?
Right, yeah. Great wedding.
Would you,
oh, it was fantastic.
If anybody tried to tell your daughter what she could or could not do, what would happen?
Oh, but she ran the whole thing. I had no say in anything.
Tough as nails, right? You got to love them. I mean, my granddaughters, they're...
Both of my daughters are so smart and everything, and they went to public schools. They went to Danvers.
My dad went to zero school. He went to the 3rd grade.
Right.
Couldn't speak a word of English. He's far brighter than I am, seriously. And with the handicaps he had, he accomplished a great deal.
Right.
And, I am proud of the young folks today. My children, in my view, and I'm being prejudiced here, but I am prejudiced, all right, about certain things. I mean, we have our own predilection. My children, in my view, were much better parents than I was. They spent more time with their families, more time with their kids, and sacrificed. You and I grew up in an era, be honest, Ralph, we had no restrictions. We were the most powerful nation in the world. Education was inexpensive. You and I went to major university with no debt. There was no question we were going to buy a house. It was just how big. We're going to get a job and making good money. I mean, we grew up in perhaps the best economic time in the history of the United States. You and I.
I think the 50s and 60s were the greatest times.
By far.
By far.
Then
I didn't have a latchkey. Did you know I never had a key?
What was that?
I never had a key.
No,
we never locked
did.
our door.
I understand it. But it changed.
Absolutely.
In the the 60s was the beginning. And then it metastasized in the 70s. And then things have changed, okay? Now, that's life. Things change.
There was a great demographic switch.
Tremendous.
In 1960, yeah.
65, post-65.
It was mostly from the South. It actually so much wasn't black and white. It was because of very poor rural students coming from the South.
Perhaps.
Yes,
but the
absolutely.
women were held back then, too. And I think that the fact that women, started to say, hey, is a good thing. We're more enriched by having that. The downside is that now both working did not have as much time for their kids raising, and since you have a married couple with powerful financial power because you have dual incomes competing for houses drove the price of everything up.
That's why. But with the dual incomes, I think what is the average income in the United States? Household is like $68,000, something
higher.
Like that. Higher maybe, right?
Yeah.
So this has pushed the houses. I mean, we have family members that have bought houses for over $1 million. I mean, it's just staggering.
Yeah, it's off the charts.
It's insanity. It's total insanity. I can't believe it. My family had a condo here in Lynn. We sold it for $50,000 more than we could have 4 years ago. Just incredible. I mean,
but there's a market for that.
But because people are making more money, basically.
Well, yeah, but it's artificial.
We don't see as much because
it's artificial. It's what you can purchase.
Right.
Okay. So the beneficiary of inflation is government, because they drive up your wages, but they take more revenue from the wages.
It's a percentage of the higher figure,
of
so
course.
they get more money.
So it's intended accordingly.
Right.
Ralph, it's been a pleasure. Now we've got a few minutes
Well,
left.
we need 3 hours for this show. We can extend
Bingo,
this.
bingo, like that. Folks, I want to hear from you about some of the things we talked about. Look, we try to do a few different things. Ralph, I want to thank you for being a real good Lynn citizen, and you're active, and you're...
I really appreciate you.
No, listen, you, Malcolm,
me to come on.
Fenton, there's a whole slew of loyal viewers, and we got great comments from you trying to make the show better, and we encourage that. I'd like to invite anybody out there that has an interest in being on our show, as Ralph did. Be more than happy to have you on. It's a stream of consciousness, so to speak. But that's it. Listen, life is better today than it's ever been. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. My dad, he came to this country, there were no streetlights. Talk about leads. There were no airplanes. There were no automobiles. There was no electricity, no heated apartments.
My dad had to go to work when he was 12 years old working on it.
Okay? And I said to my dad, I said, the good old days. He said, what are you, crazy? He said, are you nuts? And on that note, folks, I am a little bit strange, but you have a great week.